This is Cognitive 6.3.
My name is Pam Crisostomo.
My name is
this summer
Pam
I've been
Crisostomo,
working at a lab
and
at
I've been
UCSD.
working at a lab at USCD.
Basically, my job has been to
isolate
isolate
plasma DNA plasmas,
for my studies.
and I'm not sure where
I'm
my
a
set
double
is.
major at Stanford, or
I'm
at
a
least I hope
double
to be.
major at Stanford, or at least I hope to be.
So I'm majoring in bio.
So I'm majoring in bio, and eventually I want to go to med school. I'm volunteering at a laboratory. And actually, I've learned an innumerable amount of things when it comes to molecular biology. So a lot that I've learned this summer. So my job is to make DNA, basically. And in order to make DNA, I need to go through two major steps. First step is growing up the bugs or the bacteria, or that are going through a process. For example, proteins, and then isolate the DNA there. And so I'm going to describe is how to start a culture of DNA, and that's called inoculation. First thing you need to do, I need what number the plasmid is, and today my boss told me that I have to make a culture of NCID, which is 1. In order to do that, I need to grow bugs overnight. So I go into her catalog of DNA and I and look number for CI9271. So I need to remember that number until I go into the freezer, and there's a lot of DNA in little tubes and certain numbers on them. So other than wasting the time looking on the label, I just look for the numbers that I'm specifically looking for. So the first thing that Delphine taught me is to label everything. So I get a piece of colored tape and write the number 32. So on a label you need the name of what it is, date, and whatever numbers. I put the number 32 in CMD, CM1, and the 8 is 82796, and I put my initials, and I stick the piece on a 3 mil, which 3 mil stands for millimeter, and I get a 10 mil culture tube and a few of LBs. Loriocrop is the which it grows. So 3 mils of LD and put it in a culture tube. In order to get that amount specific, I have a tool called the pipette, and it's kind of a suction, and it's more of a mechanic thing. And you stick the pipette into the pipette aid and suction up 3 millimeters of LD and 3 mils of the LB into the culture tube. I need this plasmid resistant, and in my box I have a little tube, A100, Amsilin 100 milligrams per milliliter. And so this is frozen, I need to take this and take it out of the freezer, put it in a heat block. You can't remove things, pipette something that's frozen. So I put it on the heat block, and once it's thawed, I get a different thing called a pipette med, which is blue, and I use the pipette, small amounts of that. So I put the pipette up, and I put the liters,
it's called
Lambda, LAMBDA. We pipette 3 lambda of the thawed ampicillin and inject that into the 3 mils of LB. And so now the bacteria and bugs are growing, and they're going to be ampicillin resistant when they grow overnight. And it cannot be frozen, can't be left outside. So when that's ready, I make sure the cap's on, the label's on, make sure everything's labeled. I go into the freezer room to get in the buds. And so now the media culture tubes ready.
Then I go into the freezer.
Then I go into the freezer.
And
The bacteria is stored negative 80 degrees Celsius. So I make sure before I start it, my gloves are on because these things are biohazardous. So now I take my tray where I have my 10 ml culture tube, and I take my pipette mend, a box of pipette tips, and also, and that's it. And I go into the freezer room, and I open the negative 80 degree freezer, and I pull up the box, that the deep box where the bacteria is stored. So I pull out the box, and I look for number 32. So I take out my little tube, or shows number 32 on it, and I put the rest of the box and put it back in the freezer. I don't want the other things all out at once. So I have my pipette and my box of pipette tips, and I scrape a little. Using my pipette tips, I scrape a little bit of the enzyme 9371 on the end of the tip, and put a little chunk of that into the 3 ml of LB that's stamped. And I put the pipette up and down in order to check if anything was on the tip or make sure everything's off of it. If the glycerol stock is too frozen and you can't isolate the chunk, then you need to take out some of the LD and squirt some of the room temperature LD into the actual stock. So you kind of soften it. It's kind of like a slushy mix. And then you remove some of the bacteria, that is already softened, so you can blend it in better. So after you scrape a little into the LB amp, and you twist the cover back on, and you put the negative degree 80 freezer, and maybe chill a little bit, or a little bit more. Make sure nothing happens. And then, so you have into solution, defrost pretty quickly. So you have your buds in solution, and then you make sure to dispose your pipettes and everything because it's a biohazard, so you need to make sure you put it in the proper waste. Then you take the thermal culture tube and put it into the shaker. And the shaker room is where buds will grow overnight. And when you have a small culture, you need to turn down the shaker so it's not, turning it too fast. And wait till it comes to a complete stop, and then after that you put the 10 ml culture tube on the shaker, and then you turn it up, close the door. It's kept at 37 degrees, so you make sure the shaker comes, where it needs to be because there's different things growing. Then you've already, let it incubate for 6-7 hours, or however long you need. And you need to inoculate a big culture. And before you leave, take the small culture and the 3 mls. Take the small culture and separate that.